Hey everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK. We're on Discord, Instagram, and Patreon. Links are in the description. We're super excited to be showcasing 4 new commanders from the Lord of the Rings set. I won the die roll, and I'm playing Aragorn, the Uniter. I'm looking to trigger Aragorn as many times as I can by casting multicolored spells. Kyle is playing partner commanders, Frodo and Sam. This is an upgraded pre-con, about 20 cards swapped. He's looking to make a bunch of hobbits and food. We have Matt playing mono green Tree Folk Tribal with Fanghorn Tree Shepherd at the helm. Big ramp and big trees. And finally, we have Chris playing Sauron the Dark Lord, and Sauron is going to lead a massive army against his enemies. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, it truly helps us out. And stick around for an appearance from my fat cat Meatball. He's so chunky. I played Rivendell as my land for turn before passing to Kyle, who dropped Sand-Stepped Citadel in that beautiful Lord of the Rings art. Yapamaya, Cradle of Growth, hits Matt's board, and then he uses that to cast Elvish Mystic. He passes the turn over to Chris, who plays a Swamp as his land for turn before passing back over to me. On my turn 2, I play a Temple Garden, tapped. I'm not in a rush. I pass back over to Kyle, who draws, and he plays a Plains as his land before casting one of his commanders, Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit. So Frodo wants Kyle to gain some life, attack, and then get tempted by the ring and maybe draw cards. He passes the turn over to Matt, who plays a Castle Garenbrig as his land for turn, and he taps for Heartwood Storyteller. So now all of us really want our opponents to play non-creature spells. We'll draw cards. Chris drops Storm-Carved Coast on his turn before passing back to me. I play Command Tower as my land before casting Samwise Gamgee. And Samwise is like, yo, come join the party and I'll make food and bring you back from the dead.
Come on, dude. It's the same guy.
Kyle doesn't take too kindly to me having my own Sam. On Kyle's turn, he plays a Command Tower, copying me, which I don't like. Then he drops Prosperous Innkeeper. When that enters the battlefield, it makes a treasure, and he should be able to gain some life when he brings in new creatures. He attacks with Frodo, and deals 1 point of commander damage to Chris before passing the turn over to Matt. He plays a Forest as his land, before casting Leaf-Crowned Elder. This could allow him to cheat in some Tree Folk or Shamans off the top of his library on his upkeep. On Chris's turn, he played Haunted Ridge as his land for turn, before casting Talisman of Indulgence. That's a non-creature spell, so each one of Chris's opponents gets to draw a card. Thanks, Matt! He casts Easterling Vanguard, and if this thing dies, it amasses an orc. Chris passes back to me, and I play a Mountain as my land for turn, which gives me all the colors I need to cast my commander, Aragorn the Uniter. And now I just need to start casting multicolored spells. When Aragorn ETB'd, I get a food token. Thanks, Samwise. Kyle casts Sam, Loyal Attendant. On his turn, this triggers Prosperous Innkeeper, gaining him a life. He moves into combat, triggering Sam, gaining a food. Then he immediately cracks said food with that treasure token, because Sam reduced the cost of activating the food tokens. He moves to combat with Frodo, and because he gained that 3 life, the ring tempts him. So he makes Frodo his ring bearer, meaning that he can't be blocked by creatures with bigger power. My creatures can't block, and I take a point of damage. He passes, and on Matt's upkeep, he finds an Everbark Shaman off the top of his library. And again, he gets to cast that for free because of his Leaf-Crowned Elder. Then he drew, dropped a forest, and played Dauntless Dowerbark. So that's just a smooth 8/8 right now. He passes, and Chris plays a Choked Estuary. Has to enter the battlefield tapped, unfortunately. Then he casts Ugluk, the White Hand, pronounced flawlessly. He moves his Easterling Vanguard to the red zone, attacking Kyle, wanting it to die, and Kyle just takes the damage. On my turn, I play Sunpetal Grove, entering the battlefield untapped. Then I cast Fayborough Elder, so this will trigger Aragorn twice. I get a human soldier, and I get to pump Aragorn +4/+4. And when my Tree Folk enters the battlefield, it makes Matt sad, but then it also makes me a food token because of Samwise. Then I cast Nature's Lore. This again triggers Aragorn, and I target him with the +4/+4 once again. All of my opponents got to draw a card, and I get my Jetmir's Garden out of the battlefield. So I'm assessing Matt as my biggest threat right now. I attack him with my handsome, beefy Aragorn, and Matt decided to chump block with his Heartwood Storyteller. And I really wish that I had a way of giving Aragorn trample just then. I pass the turn to Kyle, who plays a Forest as his land. He jumps into combat, triggering Sam, getting a food token, and then cracking said food token, gaining 3 life, and again attacking with his commander, Frodo. And the ring tempts him once again, so not only is he unblockable, but he also gets to loot a card. He casts Night's Whisper as a follow-up play, drawing 2 more cards and losing 2 life. Kyle then passes the turn back over to Matt, and on his upkeep, Leaf-Crowned Elder will trigger, but he whiffs. He plays a Forest as his land, and then activates Castle Garenbrig, plus his Elvish Mystic in order to cast his commander, Fanghorn Tree Shepherd. This thing can generate him a ton of mana that does not go away. Matt activates his Everbark Shaman, exiling a Tree Folk from his graveyard. This will have him find 2 basic forests, entering the battlefield tapped. Before combat, Kyle casts Swords to Plowshares on Fanghorn, because he just didn't want Matt to have that. Then he hops into the red zone and smashes into Kyle with his 10-10, and Kyle takes it. Over to Chris's turn, he plays the One Ring. This super thematic, indestructible thing draws him cards and loses life the more he uses it. Pretty great card design, in my opinion. He then casts Shadow Spear, and that has him tapped out so he can't equip it. He moves into combat and deals 2 damage at Matt. On my turn, I draw and play Spire Garden. And with that out, I cast Bilbo, Retired Burglar. This will trigger my commander twice. So Aragorn says, yo, deal somebody 3 points of damage. And I choose Matt to take that before scrying 2 cards. And I put both of them onto the bottom of my library because they were bad. I make a food token thanks to Sam, and Bilbo said, the ring tempts you when I ETB. So I make Aragorn my ring bearer, and I'm hoping to get tempted some more and take advantage of the later effects. I realize he's probably not going to be unblockable anytime soon. I cast Gimli, Mournful Avenger, so again I'll get to deal 3 points of damage, this time to Kyle, and I'll pump Aragorn +4/+4, make a food token before moving to combat at Matt with my commander. He takes it all to his face, dropping down to 29. I pass the turn over to Kyle, who plays Sun Petal Grove, with that beautiful Lord of the Rings artwork. I'm so thrilled about all this artwork. It's so good. He moves into combat, making a food, and then sacking the food, satisfying Frodo as he moves into combat. So he draws a card off of Frodo, and then he loots because he attacked thanks to the ring and being tempted. He decides on a card, and he pitches a Blooming Marsh. Matt gets stung by Frodo. See what I did there? And then Kyle casts Farseek. So he'll go and find a godless shrine, entering the battlefield tapped, because that's what Farseek says to do. On Matt's turn, sadly he whiffs on his upkeep again, but then he casts a Soul Ring, right on time. He then plays Dormant Grove. This will throw a counter around on combat and become a thing. He then plays Lifecrafter's Bestiary, enabling some future scry action as well as possible card draw, like he's doing now after casting Llanowar Elves. He pays 1 green manas to draw a card. On combat, Dormant Grove triggers. He puts a 1/1 counter on Leaf-Crowned Elder, so that'll flip Dormant Grove into Gnarled Grove Strider. He moves into combat with his Vigilancy thing, smashing into me, dropping me to 28. On Chris's turn, he loses a life because of the ring. Then he'll activate the 1 ring, putting another burden counter on it, drawing 2 cards, playing an island, and then cast his commander.
Dude, it's Sauron, the Dark Lord. What's he do? He's like Voldemort, but he's got a nose.
Does he though? He's got a mask, helmet, thing. Then passes the turn over to me. I don't like Sauron being out, so I cast Éowyn, Fearless Knight, triggering my commander, getting me another 1/1, dealing 3 points of damage to Kyle. This will also trigger Sauron, getting Chris an Orc army. When Éowyn ETBs, I make a food, as well as target Sauron with her ability. In order to do so, I had to sacrifice a legendary creature, which was Bilbo. When he LTB'd, I get tempted, and before combat, Kyle casts Path to Exile on my commander. In response, I cast Akroma's Will, and because I have Aragorn out, my creatures get Flying, Vigilance, Double Strike, Lifelink, Indestructible, Protection from all colors, until end of turn. I got another 1/1 when I cast it, and then I move into combat, spreading the love around, and I deal a total of 28 points of damage to my opponents. And thanks to that lifelink being on Akroma's Will, this puts me back up to a healthy total of 56. I have to discard a card on my end step, which ends up being a Galadriel. I pass the turn to Kyle, who plays an Isolated Chapel as his land for turn. Then he moves into combat, triggering Sam, again sacrificing the food token, gaining 3 life. He has no good attack, so he moves into second main phase, dropping an Arcane Signet into a Pippin, Warden of Isengard. That gains him a life, thanks to Prosperous Innkeeper, and he goes and gets to fetch up a Merry, Warden of Isengard, thanks to Pippin. He puts that into his hand, and then he passes the turn to Matt. On his upkeep, he scries, thanks to Life Crafters, and then he again whiffs from Leaf-Crowned Elder. He dropped a Forest, and then he cast Shamanic Revelation. So this bad boy is going to have him draw 6 cards, as well as gain a total of 8 life. Yeah, that's a pretty good rate for a total of 5 mana on that. Following that, he casts Spider Silk Armor, so all of his creatures have reach, and +0/+1. He drops Unstoppable Ash, which champions one of his tree folk. It'll buff his blocked things, and he attacks me.
2 humans in front of the guys that don't have trample.
Alright, they're gonna get a +0/+5.
That's it. And then I'm gonna put 1 human in front of the trample guy too. Why not?
Okay, so you're gonna take 11.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then trigger on Gimli, Mournful Avenger.
So I'll take my beats. I had 3 creatures die, triggering Gimli 3 times, and on the 3rd time, I'll have him fight Frodo.
The classic Gimli and Frodo battle of 2023.
And Frodo perishes thanks to Gimli's axe, and Matt passes the turn. Chris loses 2 life on his upkeep before dropping Barad-dûr, entering the battlefield untapped and can potentially amass him more orcs. He activates the 1 ring, putting another burden counter on it and drawing 3 cards this time. He casts There and Back again. After that ETBs, Chris will throw a lower counter on there, and he'll make Ugluk his ring bearer after he gets tempted, and he'll choose a creature that can't block.
I'll choose the 11/11.
So Matt's big old creature cannot block, which is good for most people. Chris casts a Changeling Outcast. Then Chris attacks Matt with his Vanguard. Matt decides not to lose life and block it. Therefore, Chris can amass, and he puts it on his Changeling Outcast, because it's an army. On his end step, I activate Samwise, and I get Galadriel back to my hand. Chris also had to discard, putting an Anger into his bin. On my turn, I draw, and then I cast Galadriel. So this will trigger Aragorn, and I give Gimli +4/+4. When it enters the battlefield, I also get to put a +1/+1 counter on Gimli, and make a food token as well. Then I cast Return of the Wild Speaker. I'll have Aragorn give the +4/+4 again to Gimli, and then Return of the Wild Speaker says, yo, draw 15 cards. And that's not nothing. I move into combat. My ring bearer says, yo, loot a card. So I'll draw a card and discard a Fell War Stone. Kyle casts Assassin's Trophy before blocks are declared, targeting my Aragorn, making me very sad. And Aragorn dies, sadly, but this allows me to go find a land from my library. In this case, it's a Steam Vents, which I'll have enter the battlefield untapped, at the cost of 2 life. Kyle will take his beats from Eowyn, and Matt will chump block my giant Gimli, returning his championed treefolk back out onto the battlefield, and again making me wish I had Trample. I cast Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, in my second main phase. That guy can give Pro a card type, which is great. And I got a food token before I passed to Kyle. He played a Swamp and recast Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, triggering Prosperous Innkeeper, getting another life, before casting Mirkwood Bats, again gaining a life and also terrifying all of his opponents. When he moves into combat, he makes a food, triggering Mirkwood Bats, draining each one of us 1. And with no good attacks, he passes. On Matt's turn, he gets a Life Crafter's trigger, and he finds a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, so he keeps that on top and plays it as his land for turn, before recasting his commander, Fanghorn Tree Shepherd, triggering Life Crafter's Bestiary and drawing a card. He then activates Nykthos, making a ton of green mana, and then using some to cast Tribute to the World Tree. And he follows that up by casting Staff of Titania, and that could be used to diabolical effect as he attaches it to his Dowerback. He then activates his Everbark Shaman, again exiling a treefolk from his bin, in order to find 2 more lands, making his Staff of Titania and his Dowerback even better. Then he casts Bushwhack, so he'll have his Dowerback fight my Samwise Gamgee. In response, I activate Sam, getting my Boromir out of the bin and back into my hand. And then Samwise dies. Then Matt will move into combat. This will trigger his staff, making a Forest Dryad, and I'll declare a block using Galadriel, blocking one of the things that does not end up killing her. I deemed it pretty important for me to keep my creatures alive, so I took a bunch of damage to my face. In Matt's second main phase, he casts Mossbeard Ancient. When that enters the battlefield, he'll gain some life. He'll draw a card off of Tribute, as well as paying 1 for Life Crafter's Bestiary, drawing another card. On Chris's upkeep, he loses some life thanks to the ring. He drew for turn, and then there and back again, allowed him to go get a Smoldering Marsh onto the battlefield. Then he'll play Command Tower as his land proper. He again activates the 1 ring, putting a burden counter on it and drawing 4 cards this time. He recasts his commander, Sauron, the Dark Lord. And with his commander back out onto the battlefield, he moves into combat at Matt, swinging both of his armies, one of them being a Changeling Outcast at him. Matt blocks the Orc army, but cannot block Changeling Outcast, and takes some damage. This will also trigger Sauron, and Chris gets tempted once again. Ugluk gets 2 counters on him, and Chris passes the turn over to me after he discards. I cast my commander once again, Aragorn, the Uniter, and then I cast Aura Shards. Aragorn gets triggered, and I give +4/+4 to Gimli. And for every spell that I'm casting, Chris gets to amass on his Changeling Outcast. I move into attacks, and Galadriel will throw a +1/+1 counter on Gimli, and before blocks are declared, I'll activate Pippin on Gimli, giving it protection from creatures. My edits may not have been super clean there, but that was certainly the intent. Casted a Boros Charm, targeting Gimli, giving him double strike. This also triggers Aragorn, dealing 3 points of damage to Kyle, and giving me another 1/1. And I deal enough combat damage to Matt with Gimli to knock him out of the game. And thanks to Aura Shards, I blew up some of of Chris's board. On my end step, Kyle activates his Pippin, getting a food token, triggering Mirkwood Bats and draining us. Then onto his turn, he casts Merry, Warden of Isengard.
Chris, you have no 1/1s, correct?
Not anymore.
Fantastic. So we go into combat.
And on combat, Sam will make him a food token, which is replaced by Merry, making Kyle a 1/1 with lifelink. And both of those trigger Mirkwood Bats, so they drain us 2. Then he sacks one of those food, gaining 3, and unceremoniously knocks me out of the game. He moves into combat with Frodo. He gets tempted by the ring. He'll draw a card thanks to Frodo, and loot a card thanks to being the ring bearer. Chris gets stung by Frodo, and then also loses more life because of the ring bearer. On Kyle's second main, he casts a Soul Ring into a Lobella, Defender of Bag End. So when that enters the battlefield, he'll exile the top card of Chris's library face down, and then he'll cast Rapacious Guest. Each one of these are triggering Prosperous Innkeeper, of course, gaining Kyle some life. He then passes the turn, and on Chris's upkeep, he loses some life thanks to the One Ring. He'll draw for turn, play a Mountain, and then activate the One Ring yet again. This time, placing a burden counter on it and drawing 5 cards. He finds a Chaos Warp and targets the Mirkwood Bats with it. A wise decision.
Kill your fate, Christopher.
Kyle shuffled that up and has Chris cut. Let's see what the top card is.
Sanguine Bond. So that's probably worse for you.
That's pretty good. Hey, do you got a Chaos Warp or something you could use against that, or?
Kyle's Mirkwood Bats turned into a Sanguine Bond, and Kyle gains a bunch of life, so we'll see how that goes. Chris casts Ring Sight as a follow-up play, so he'll get tempted, and then he'll go and find a card. In this case, it's a Widespread Brutality. They very nearly one-sided board wipe, but not quite. So Chris will amass 2 on his Changeling Outcast, and then he'll blow up pretty much everything. He'll lose 2 when Rapacious Guest dies, and he gets that exiled card back, but it's face down and exiled. Widespread Brutality deals that damage to everything but army tokens, so he smashes into Kyle. And then Chris passes the turn back over to Kyle. On his turn, he recasts his partner commander Sam, Loyal Attendant. He moves into combat, triggering Sam, gaining another food token. And because Sam says, yo, activate foods for less, he activates all 3, gaining 9 points of life, Sanguine Bond, draining Chris 9 points of life as well. And with that, Kyle breathes a sigh of relief as he passes the turn, and Chris's upkeep trigger kills him.
Very flavorful.
This is very fitting.
Look at this. Look at this.
Nice.
Sauron, how could you?
That was so good.
You died to the temptation.
Our boy Samwise Gamgee.
Sam? It's canon. Sam saved everything by making food.
Just making food, just cooking around.
Some like lambus bread or something.
Yeah.
No shot.
Some lambus
That's a
bread.
crazy end. You had this.
I am so thrilled with how this game went out. I don't even care that I lost.
Yeah.
And congratulations, Kyle. Job well done on that super thematic victory. It was almost like watching the movies. And here's Meatball. He's so chunky. And there you have it. That's the game. Please let us know what you thought about this game in the comments. Let us know what you're excited about for the new Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth set. Please subscribe if you haven't already. You could join us on Discord and follow us on Instagram. Thank you for watching.